I discovered my best friend killed her husbando. She control his haunting spirit. I never should have opened that door. When I did, the chill crept over me like ice water running down my spine. I felt it before I saw it. A darkness cloaked the room, thick and oppressive. It was more than just the absence of light, it was alive, breathing, waiting. Every Friday night, I would meet Sarah at our usual diner, the safe haven filled with laughter and the aroma of greasy fries. But tonight? Tonight was different. I noticed her hands trembled as she stirred her coffee, the spoon clattering against the cup. Her eyes flickered with a hint of dread, shadows pooling beneath them. "I need to show you something," she whispered, barely audible above the din of the patrons. That we walked to her house, and each step felt heavier than the last. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. The walls seemed to close in around us. I could feel the whispers, soft and haunting, like a ghostly choir just out of earshot. My heart raced, a solid thump in my chest. What was she hiding? She led me to the living room, and my breath hitched. In the corner, an old portrait hung crookedly, a picture of her husband, Daniel. His smile was wide, but his eyes? They pierced through me, hollow and chilling. "He's been different since the accident," Sarah muttered. The air was thick with unspoken words, with dread curling in the corners like smoke. The lights flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced along the walls. A strange noise echoed behind me, a thud, then a soft whisper, "My name?" I spun around, but the room was empty. My skin prickled. Was it just my imagination? Or something more? With a trembling hand, she reached for an old, dusty box, pulling it from the shelf. She opened it cautiously, revealing trinkets, a locket, a scarf, and a diary. The air grew colder, as if the room itself recoiled from the memories contained within. I peered into the diary, pages yellowed and brittle, filled with frantic scrawls about secrets, shadows, and a growing madness. "That I think he's still here," she whispered, her eyes darting around, wide and terrified. My heart raced. Was she saying what I thought she was? I didn't want to believe it. The shadows thickened. The whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. Suddenly, a door slammed shut somewhere in the house. My breath caught in my throat. "Sarah?" I called, my voice barely a squeak. Her face went pale, she grabbed my wrist with a grip that felt like iron. "We have to leave," she said, urgency spilling from her lips. And then, I saw a figure, faint, flickering, barely there, emerging from the shadows at the far end of the hallway. My body stiffened, frozen in terror as it moved closer. I could hardly breathe. My heart thundered. What had I stumbled into? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure paused, its outline shifting like fog caught in a breeze. A chill slithered down my spine as I noticed the unmistakable shape of Daniela's shadowy silhouette, flickering around the edges, his mouth forming a soundless cry. My instinct screamed at me to run, but Sarah's grip was a vice, holding me in place as dread washed over me like a wave. "Please, don't move," she whispered, her breath ragged. "He can sense fear." As Sarah, what do you mean? My voice trembled, panic clawing at my throat. The figure didn't advance or retreat, it stayed there, hovering like a forgotten memory, eyes glimmering with something dark. I was frozen, caught between the warmth of denial and the abyss of reality. The whispers crescendoed, morphing into incoherent murmurs suffused with anguish. They danced in the air, wrapping around us, intoxicating and suffocating. I could almost make out the syllables, fragments of memories, screams for help, or was it laughter mocking us? "He's trapped," Sarah said suddenly, breaking me from my daze. "He's angry, confused. I thought I could control it. I thought I could bring him back, but he's not the same." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and I realized she was blaming herself. This was more than just a haunting, it was a reckoning. Before I had the chance to respond, a fierce gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the solitary candle flickering on the coffee table. Darkness enveloped us, and in that all-consuming void, the whispers turned to screams, vibrant and filled with sorrow. "Sarah!" I yelled, struggling to break her grip and find my way back to the door, but the shadows seemed to grow teeth, gnashing at my heels, reminding me that escape was a luxury. "Look." She pointed, her voice hoarse, eyes wide as she conceded defeat. "He's trying to show us something." I turned instinctively, and the darkness parted slightly. The figure stepped closer, revealing shifting features that morphed like shadows cast by flickering light. It wasn't just Daniel anymore. The whispers congregated into a single visage, a collective of anguish, each face merging into the next, twisted and grotesque. At first, I saw Daniel smile, but then a woman's anguish morphed beside him, a face I didn't recognize, mouth stretched in a silent scream. The air thickened with the acrid smell of decay, and an overwhelming sensation of dread filled the room. My instinct screamed to flee, but then it was as if Daniel's spectral form reached out, fingers extending toward me, swirling with desperation. In that moment, clarity struck me like a bolt of lightning. "He's not here to punish you, Sarah. He needs you to let him go." I shouted, but the words barely caught on to the oppressive atmosphere. The cries became a chorus, attacking our senses, overwhelming us. A hollow laughter rolled through the room, chilling me deeper than the cold air could. I could feel the weight of the shadows as they closed in, a dense fog of darkness that clung to my skin, that seeped into my veins. The figures, Daniel and the many others, swarmed closer, their eyes filled with longing, with needs unfulfilled. "You're right," Sarah's voice faltered, tremors echoing through her words. "But I can't. I don't know how." Her pleading gaze slid to the diary on the floor, the corners of its pages fluttering as if beckoning. When she lunged for it, the moment moved in slow motion. A heavy silence filled the air with ominous anticipation. As she opened it, an ear-splitting scream ruptured from the shadows, freezing me to the bone. The figures writhing around us began to twist and contort violently, morphing into horrifying shapes, monstrosities with broken limbs and empty faces. They surged through the room like a tide, and I realized they were hungry for something, someone. No. "Sarah, don't!" I shouted as she skimmed through the pages. With every turn, the shadows grew more desperate, their grasp tightening as if they could feel the stirring of life, their last hope. But then silence, the murmuring ceased, and a cold breath filled the room. "No!" Sarah screamed, throwing down the diary. A flash of lightning illuminated the room momentarily, revealing Daniel's face. A look of stark horror twisted upon his features as he dissipated into black nothingness. The walls appeared to breathe as if the house itself were awakening, and just as abruptly, the temperature dropped further, each breath crystallizing in front of us. I turned to Sarah, but the room was spinning as black tendrils emerged from the corners, snaking toward us. In that moment, I knew we were teetering on the precipice of something unspeakably horrific. It was not just Daniel's spirit at play, but something far darker was awakening in the house, and it was hungry. "Sarah!" I yelled, desperate, panic clawing my voice. "What did you do?" And that's when the whispers returned, louder, clearer, coalescing into a single phrase that echoed through the depths of my soul: "You cannot leave." The darkness deepened, pressing against my chest as the realization recoiled like a coiled serpent in my mind. The weight of fear wrapped around me, wrapping me tighter with each passing moment. "We need to get out of here," I shouted, but the words felt empty against the burgeoning terror that clawed at the edges of reality. Sarah stood frozen, her wide eyes fixed on the shadows that curled like smoke around us, ghostly figures emerging from the walls and reaching for her. Their faces twisted in silent screams, mouths wide but failing to utter a sound. They were not just reflections of lost souls, they were the embodiment of entrapment, an invitation to despair. "Sarah, we can't help them," I gasped, adrenaline pumping through my veins as the figures began to inch closer, their outstretched hands writhing, reaching, begging. "You have to let it go." But even as the words escaped me, I felt a shifting and echo of Daniel's sorrow resonating within the confines of my heart, an appeal I longed to understand, but this was no longer just about Daniel. Shadows darted in and out of the darkness like fleeting glimpses of tormented life, faces I couldn't decipher, each twisting in agony, colors lost to darkness. They were hungry, and I could feel their need, almost like a pulsating call. No. Sarah's voice shattered my thoughts. She brushed sticky sweat from her brow, her expression swirling between horror and determination. "No. Help me. Please help me understand." The specters froze at her desperate plea, pausing like disturbed animals. Then, as if provoked, they surged forward, and the room erupted in chaos, in a cacophony of shrieks and gnashing teeth, limbs grasping at our flesh as we stood paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. "Sarah," I pleaded. "Fight this. You have to fight this." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath our feet, sending vibrations steeped in anguish rippling through the house, causing dust to fall like rain. The walls seemed to breathe, and grotesque carvings emerged on the surfaces, depicting scenes of torment and decay, some familiar, some utterly alien. "The diary," Sarah shouted, eyes wild and frenzied. "It can show us the truth," but even as she said it, the memory of the diary felt like a venomous snake slithering through my mind. I remembered the swirling script, filled with fragmented thoughts that coursed through Sarah's past, revealing a darkness threaded with death that I dared not acknowledge. "You don't know what you're playing with," I screamed above the uproar. In a burst of defiance, Sarah lunged for the diary again, tearing it from the ground. I surged towards her, desperate to stop her, but her hand flicked open the pages like a moth drawn to flame. The shadows recoiled momentarily, more screams erupted, filling the air with an unholy rage that pulsed like a drum. Papers whipped violently as if the house itself was alive, fighting to suppress the truth. "It's here. The answer is here," she cried, her voice breaking, caught in the frenzied murmurs of the gathering storm. With every turn of the page, shapes inside the shadows contorted into what I thought I recognized: houses on fire, families lost, and then, there. A face: Daniel. But beside him were other images of moments preserved in sinister hues, laughter turned to despair, smiles distorted into masks of terror. And then it came, a flickering juxtaposition unveiled something deeper. A family, one I didn't know, framed with loss, a husband and wife trapped in an embrace of eternal grief through a gruesome misunderstanding. "That we have to go," I screamed again, horrified by what revelations awaited. A sudden wave of exhilaration cut through the dread as I realized we were standing behind a veil, a thin fabric separating our world from theirs, haunted regrets tethering the life we once held dear. And then, in a flicker of blindness, darkness enveloped us all. My heart raced as the realization coursed through me, every shadow feeding like a parasite on the energy of our fears. The air grew thick. Shadows darkened into a deeper shade. "Sarah." I could barely hear my own voice. It was drowned out by tumultuous screams. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, and the spirits darted to the front, forming a cyclone of anguish that swallowed all light. Faces morphed into one twisted and malevolent force that howled with rage, fueled by betrayal and despair. And as it drew nearer, a feeling of intimacy struck me. I could taste their longing, and it was sickeningly sweet. Then, the final piercing scream radiated through the air, and from the center of the vortex surged forth an unmistakable Shapi figure, shimmering and translucent, emerging from the tumult. I could hardly breathe. It was Daniel, but twisted, misaligned in a grotesque imitation of the man I knew, eyes sunken, skin pallid, devoid of warmth. "Help me," his hollow voice echoed, tinged with pain. My heart stopped, dread robbing me of breath. "Sarah! Run!" I screamed, instinctively reaching for her, but as I spun, I was faced with a backlit silhouette. The door, warped and bleeding shadows, pulsated like a heartbeat. No! She cried as Daniel's form stretched towards her, an outstretched hand desperately clawing through the air like a yearning to fill an unquenchable void. And then, it contorted in agony, revealing hundreds of souls trapped within, all screaming for freedom as the world around us creaked and began to unravel. And then, as Sarah faltered, her expression morphing from fear to an unnatural calm, the floor beneath us fractured, splintering apart as laughter, both mocking and triumphant, surged from the shadows. "Sarah!" I shrieked, lifting my hands in a futile attempt to pull her back from the encroaching darkness, but the shadows ripped into the very essence of my scream, swallowing it whole, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't just facing the darkness, I was part of it. As her gaze turned to me, a slow smile emerged, a sinister twist that mirrored the malignant spirits around us. "Join them," she breathed, her voice dripping with a chilling calm, and just like that, the world around us fell into chaotic silence as I felt the pull of the abyss beneath my feet, drawing closer with every breath. The air thickened with the aftermath of dread as Sarah's smile carved a line of horror through my mind. I had never seen her like this, lost in shadows with a contagion of sinister delight that turned my stomach. "Sarah, no!" I shouted, but my voice cracked like porcelain under pressure. Join them," she repeated, a warped echo sliding from her lips, her eyes glimmering with a madness I hadn't wanted to believe. I stumbled back, my body shaking, limbs heavy with a weight I couldn't explain. The chill of the room seeped into my bones as the lurking darkness shifted, threatening to envelope both of us. The chilling laughter swirled around us like a living thing, threading through the air with an insidious intimacy. I could feel it drawing closer, hungry and pulsating, eager for my conviction to waver. I hesitated, fighting, yet the shadows whispered sweet nothings that wrapping around me like tendrils of fog, promising knowledge, acceptance, a place among them. No, I'm not a part of this. I gasped, struggling against their lure, but my resolve began to weaken, blurring at the edges, like trying to hold water in my hands. I wanted to shake sense back into Sarah, but the depth of her gaze told me her spirit was already spiraling into the abyss. Me best friend stepping off the precipice into madness willingly. "Daniel is here, can't you feel him? He wants you too," she taunted, as the shadows began to rise around her, princely serpents curling around her form. Her hair danced, wild and unbound, as if embracing the spirits, her laughter chiming with the resonance of a lost soul. Across the room, I spotted the diary sprawled across the floor, pages fluttering like the wings of a dying bird, calling to the truth buried within truths that had become more dangerous than ever. With a surge of adrenaline, I thrust myself toward it, the floor cracking beneath my feet, the cravings of the spirits drowning me in their shroud, but the moment I reached to snatch it, the energy in the room shifted violently. The shadows, enraged, flared out like flames, licking hungrily at the corners of my vision. "No! You want escape." The voice was deep, a thunderous harmony rising like a tidal wave of anguish. It was neither Daniel's nor Sarah's, it belonged to the very essence of this place, thrumming with ancient hate. Screams erupted anew, tearing through my mind as the shadows surrounded me, their movements chaotic and swift. I felt an indescribable pull, it slammed into my chest like a hammer, each pulse whispering dark memories, woven words of loss and betrayal. "Sarah!" I cried out, desperation ripping through me like a harpoon, but it only seemed to tether her deeper into the murk of despair. Her laughter echoed as she stepped closer to the shadowy vortex, and Daniel's face rose pendulously from the depths, contorting as if fighting against some unseen restraints. "I can't take it any more," I shouted, thrusting my hands toward the swirling shadows. "I won't let you have her. I won't let you have me." A furious howl met my resolve, and suddenly, the chaos burst forth like a storm, a tempest fueled by grief. Dark hands snatched at me, tearing at my limbs and the fabric of my being, pulling me into their sorrowful waltz. My vision dimmed as the room twisted, a kaleidoscope of darkness and light battling for a moment that felt like a century. Then, amidst the upheaval, clarity surged through me. I needed to confront the truth, not just of this house, but of Yusuf, Sarah, of Daniel, of the ghosts we could never escape. "Sarah!" I shouted, my voice rising through the cacophony. "He's hurting. This isn't what you really want." Her gaze flickered, a brief hesitation taunting reality. He needs me. I can set him free, she countered, but a crack appeared in her facade, revealing the inner turmoil of fracture. No. You're losing yourself. This is what binds him. You must choose. I lunged forward, reaching desperately for her. Yet as I glanced toward Daniel, the air turned frigid, sharp as glass. His form shimmered, shifting, revealing not just anguish, something else entirely. A darker presence lurked behind him, a shadow destined to consume everything in its path. Suddenly, the walls of the house wilted like dying flowers, forming spirals as tendrils reached out hungrily, endeavoring to consume us both, as if the house itself were a monstrous being waking from slumber. In that moment of desperation, as I grasped for Sarah, I caught her gaze, but in the depths of her eyes, I saw not the gleam of friendship I cherished but the reflection of something darker, a multitude of spirits swirling behind her, their screams a symphony of loss, blending with the seductive whispers of destruction. Choose, Sarah. I cried, just as coils of shadow snaked closer, wrapping around her ankles, threatening to drag her into the abyss. But the turmoil in her eyes flickered, revealing a decision that loomed heavy between us. With a final surge of will, I reached for her hand. Please. Don't let this be the end. But as our fingers brushed, just a hair's breadth apart, the house let out a wail, a deafening cacophony enveloping us as the abyss pulsed, and the shadows surged. The dark presence behind Daniel stretched forward, a claw of the netherworld, and the two forms converged, morphing into a singular chaos. And then, before I could process the horror, Sarah smiled once more, a smile that held a different meaning, an understanding of inevitable fate. Help him, she whispered, almost mercifully, before the shadows swallowed her whole, the darkness consuming her as it echoed with a roar that shattered reality. The last thing I saw was the twisted silhouette of Daniel reaching for her, beckoning with arms wide open, just before everything plunged into a suffocating black void. And then, within that overwhelming silence, her final words rang in my ears, "I'm sorry," before I felt the last tether to my own sanity snapping, unraveling into the dark. I was left alone, not just among shadows, but now entangled in a web of horror that dared me to seek the truth. The ground trembled again, but this time, I realized it was not the house rebelling, it was the very souls within, crying in their endless torment that I stood at the center of a maelstrom. A choice awaited, one I had to make. But lurking in that profound silence, I shivered, knowing fully well that the darkness would never truly let go. And then the laughter returned, a cacophony of voices resonating into the void, demanding to be heard. Join us, it sang, promising not release, but a bond forged in anguish. With my heart racing, panic enveloping me, I took a step forward, aware that my next choice would determine the fate of my own soul, and that chilling laughter invited me back again. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of unspoken truths and spectral hands pressing against my skin. Every pulse of darkness around me reverberated with the malevolence that had ensnared Sarah, urging me to delve deeper into the unknown for answers. I gritted my teeth, aware that every step I took marked me, linked me to shadows far older and crueler than I could fathom. Join us, the chorus reached out, wrapping around my body like a shroud, the promise of understanding mingling with foreboding. I clenched my fists, torn between temptation and the horrifying specter of my friend's fate. Sarah. I shouted again, my voice an echo against the tumult. What lay in the depths of that spiraling void? Would I still find her, or had the darkness consumed her entirely, leaving only a marionette dancing to its sinister tune? The walls pulsed with energy, undulating as memories floated to the surface. Sarah and Daniel laughing, their eyes full of life, unaware of the darkness lurking in their future. My own memory wavered, feeling distant as the present tugged at me insistently, suffocating me under the weight of its implications. Daniel. I screamed, redirecting my anger toward the figure now fading into the encroaching shadows. What have you done? In response, the atmosphere thickened, the shadows recoiling momentarily as if I had struck a nerve. A deep, solemn whisper broke through. Free me, it cooed, echoing with longing. It dawned on me that Daniel was more than a ghost, he was a harbinger of betrayal and sorrow, forged from the very fabric of loathing and heartbreak that he now sought to unleash upon his beloved. Free you? I echoed incredulously, piecing together fragments of conversations from Sarah's past, moments carved with jealousy, anger, and despair. The foundation of her existence now felt like a fragile construct, on the brink of collapse. But that would mean save her. The voice cut sharply, startling me. The shadows shifted as if coiling back to confront the truth I had buried. I staggered backward, fear clenching my throat. Saved? You've both become grotesque echoes of memory's soft pain. Suffering strengthens the bond, the shadows crooned, slithering around me with a seductive grace. A haunting melody wove through the chaos as a vision of Sarah flickered near, her face drawn and pale, trapped beneath layers of darkness and despair. No. I shouted against the tide, struggling against the whispers wrapping themselves around my heart. I won't let you take her. There was no audible reply, yet somehow, the very fabric of reality warped around me. I felt the walls imploding, my vision tunneling into an oppressive black. Just when the weight felt unbearable, I heard Ida's soft cry, muffled but clear, "Daniel." I yelled, the name now a desperate plea charged with urgency. "You don't want this. You're trapped in here too." The shadows rippled and twisted, and faint outlines began to form around Mephises obscured by pain but recognizable. Suddenly, they lunged, reaching out. "Join us in bliss," they pleaded, their grip an icy caress. I recoiled, torn between terror and the undeniable pull toward those haunting memories, the memories of love splintered. Did I dare seek what Sarah had surrendered to? My gut twisted with a noxious mixture of dread and dark curiosity as Daniel's visage flickered before me, pleading and menacing all at once. "Suffering isn't freedom," I shouted into the roar, disbelief surging through me. "It binds you to this hell." "You don't care about her." In that instant, smoke and shadow shivered, warping as if considering my words. The air shifted from suffocating to brittle, like glass ready to shatter. I had become a catalyst in their wretched gammy presence, forcing the ghostly figures to reckon with their own misery. "Set her free." Daniel's voice, now an anguished wail, split through the cacophony of spirits. It shattered the facade of madness, pushing back against the inky veil surrounding me. The tendrils tightened around my throat, but I surged forward, gripping onto the proximity of his ephemeral shape. The phantoms of lost souls writhed, their faces stretching into grotesque masks of despair and insatiable thirst. They whispered a chant, a horrific refrain promising salvation through release, wanting nothing more than to drag me down with them. But then, as if in answer to my defiance, a blinding light burst from the ground, illuminating everything and everyone. Daniel's hands shot forward, tempestuous and urgent. "Sarah!" he roared, voice imbued with a primal fear. I turned, heart racing. The shadows recoiled, drawing back momentarily. But where I had expected to see just darkness engulfing Sarah, I now witnessed a battle brewing, the spirits contending with each other in a frenzy that echoed like a tempest unleashed, their wails turned into vengeful cries. In that terrifying instant, a figure materialized in the chaos, cloaked in thick shades of twilight. It was Sarah, her features distorted, teetering between two realms, fighting desperately against the overwhelming flood of anguished souls. "Help me," came a rasp, tugging at my heart even as the frantic energy pulsed vehemently around us. "Together," I shouted, reaching into the void towards her. My fingers brushed against hers, a fleeting moment filled with warmth and desperation amidst the cold dread, yet the shadows writhing grew more agitated, swirling in a frenzy. "Dissolve the bond," Daniel screamed, panic lacing his tone as he lunged forward, trying to close the distance. "We have to end this. I can't let you go. I can't." The torment and urgency in her voice carried an aching plea. I felt the darkness lurch forward, a ravenous maw now gaping wide, seeking to engulf her entirely and drag us both into eternal chaos. I hesitated, the realization dawning grimly that the bond they shared was woven tightly in stitched together strands of their betrayal and love. If I unraveled it, would it free them both or obliterate one forever? "Daniel!" I cried, raw terror for Sarah driving my panic deeper. Would she become a mere echo within this haunted sanctuary, to be a reminder of what could never endure? What will you choose to preserve? The shadows hissed, erupting around us in frenzied shadows, their drag growing heavier, calling me to decide in that excruciating moment. Choose. With a last desperate lunge toward Sarah, I summoned all the strength within me. You both deserve peace. But as I spoke those words, the house trembled violently, and a hidden door creaked open behind Sarah's fading silhouette. The threshold beckoned, unveiling an abyss like a blackened mouth craving retribution. Inescapable dread crashed over me. The choice was forced, the timing suffocating as Daniel and Sarah collided against the specter of the house, clinging to their fragile connection. No! I screamed, but comprehension was slipping like sand through my fingers. Suddenly, the shadows whipped into a frenzy as Sarah's face twisted with fissures of agony. Help me, she gasped, but even as her desperation reached me, the darkness surged like a wave, and then, just as the locust of spirits burst forth in a final attempt to seize her, the ground beneath our feet crumbled, pulling everything into the void. My heart lurched as Daniel's face twisted into horror, his cries echoing into oblivion while Sarah lingered at the edge, a final moment frozen in time as her outstretched hand began to fade. And then, with a thunderous roar that shattered my senses, everything plunged into night. The breath was stolen from my lungs as silence swallowed me whole, completely. Just when I thought despair triumphed, a soft sigh echoed in the void. You chose. The shadows reverberated, their discordant harmony washing over me, insatiable and patient. And in that oppressive stillness, a haunting question lingered: how far into the darkness would I dare to venture to find the truth? Time stretched, and within the encroaching black, slowly, and irrevocably the laughter returned. Join us. But this time, the laughter was my own, mingled with a phantom's promise whispering, waiting for the slip. With the suffocating darkness closing in, I felt the ground beneath my feet shift, heavy and ominous. The shadows hungered, teeming with a malevolence that coursed through the air like poison. My heart thudded wildly in my chest, resonating with an unending pulse of dread, and I struggled to comprehend the enormity of what had just transpired. The reflection of despair I had seen flickering in Sarah's eyes before the darkness swallowed her rattled me to my core. Join us. The chilling echo danced around me like a serpent, taunting, seducing, pulling me toward the depths of what I dared not accept. I knew, even in the abyssal void, that the darkness would stop at nothing to peel back my fears, strip my will away one layer at a time. I stumbled backward, uncertain of where to step in this haunted terrain as waves of anguish washed over me. In the distance, amidst the silence, a low murmur pulsed, a chant interwoven with Sarah's name. It beckoned me, a siren's call, demanding my connection to unravel further. I could almost make out her voice, and as I strained to listen, an unbearable weight danced in my chest. It was an achingly familiar sound, dulcet yet tortured. Understand. The murmur turned into a roar, an overwhelming swell that shattered my resolve. You are unfolding a truth submerged within sorrow. And within that truth, I felt the air shift abruptly, thick with the smell of decay, leaving a charred taste on my tongue. The walls of my mind rattled with sudden clarity. I remembered Daniel's haunting expression from moments before. It was the visage of a man robbed of his peace, forever entwined with Sarah's fate. Where are you, Sarah? I called, voice trembling through the expansive dark as I braced for another torrent of shadows. But what emerged instead was silence eerily perennial, wrapping me in its tangible grasp. My breath became ragged as I pressed on, shards of fear slicing into my gut. As I moved deeper into the shroud of darkness, the ground started to rumble beneath me, revealing an old, splintered staircase, descending into obscurity. The air grew chilly, each breath straining as a dismal fog swirled around my ankles. Compelled by instinct, I took a hesitant step, the wood creaking underfoot, announcing my folly to the void. Deeper and deeper I went, pressed by the shadows pushing forth their whispered truths that denied my will. As I reached the bottom landing, the world around me flickered like dying embers, and there, just before me, was an open door emanating a sickly, spectral light. As I tentatively crossed the threshold, the scene before me froze in a sickly tableau. I was enveloped in a grotesque play set within the dim confines of what resembled an old living room. On the faded wallpaper were traces of something once beautiful, now crumbling to rot. And in the center, an old rocking chair weaved back and forth, completely still yet somehow alive with energy, cradling the secrets of a haunted past. Save them, a voice, dripping with torment yet infused with longing, floated through the room, wrapping around my throat like a noose. Daniel? Sarah? I shouted into the abyssal silence, but no replies echoed back. Instead, the rocking intensified, creaking rhythmically with a ghostly cadence as if taunting me with a morbid lullaby. Then, from the corner of my eye, I spotted a figure. It was small, shrouded in shadows, an infant. My pulse quickened, both the sight and the sound inexplicable. I approached, heart racing, the air thickening with a sense of foreboding. As the figure slowly turned, the shroud fell back, unveiling a skeletal visage of a child with hollow, haunting eyes. Mommy, where did you go? The word slithered from its mouth, insidious and sad, yet devoid of innocence. No. I screamed, staggering backward, mind racing with horror-induced memories, the weight of betrayal crashing upon me, a reflection of Sarah's anguished past, raising questions that twisted at my sanity. What have you done? But the figure pointed past me, a bony finger directed toward the doorway I had just crossed, as if its twisted gaze saw something that I did not. Help her, it urged, the echo morphing into a disgruntled rumble, shadows mingling with anguish, heightening the tension that coiled tighter around me. Then it struck: this wasn't merely a child lost in the dark, the essence hovered, draped in a shroud of familial sorrow that tethered it to Sarah's own choices, her own sins. This was the culmination of everything she had withheld, every shadow she had danced with in her attempts to piece together a life. Suddenly, another whisper pierced the tension, this time a familiar voice, rasping with desperation. Help us! Time seemed to freeze, twisting painfully as if it mirrored the dread pooling within me. I felt helpless against the weight of the spirits that clamored for release. Voices distorting into grotesque tones filled my ears, enveloping me in their relentless wails. Daniel. I called sharply, yet without conviction, my legs quaking as I gazed into the abyss beyond. What choice could there ever be? What salvation awaited after this descent into despair? And just as I braced myself against the impending tsunami of shadows, a piercing shriek erupted from beyond the living room, a sound that shattered my world into fragments. A soul ripped from its tether, leaving behind only a hollow echo of what once was. The air turned thick with malevolence, cycling through the endless nightmares I had only glimpsed until now. No longer could I remain a bystander. I had been entangled irrevocably in this wretched web of haunting truths that sought to reclaim its own. Somewhere in the oppressive dark, I envisioned Sarah battling to reclaim her freedom from the grasp of shadows that bid her join their abhorrent celebration. My pulse quickened with fear, igniting a sinister determination. But as I turned to make my choice, the child's bones cracked ominously, its gaze now seeping with foreboding clarity. Choose wisely, or the shadows will engulf you, too, it murmured, the words slithering into my mind, coiling around my thoughts like the ghosts of the past. And then, in that wretched instant, beneath the incessant whispers of souls lost and the flickering light that beckoned me forth, the existence of the darkness transformed. Once marine infinite abyss of consequences, waiting, eager for my surrender as the shadows collapsed inward. In that moment, engulfed by an overwhelming sense of dread, I realized with a gasp that the door behind me was closing, the way back vanishing under layers of darkness as the laughter began anew, cacophonous and insatiable. Would I succumb to this timeless game, or would I find a way to confront the haunting truth buried within? In truth, I was left with no choice. It would either claim my soul or lead me deeper into the nightmare crafted by Sarah's past. And as the shadows curled towards me like an angry serpent, I clenched my fists, and the echo of my own voice taunted, "Join us!" But I wasn't ready to submit, even as the abyss staked its claim, ready to unveil the horrors that lingered in the uncharted depths. The moment the door slammed shut behind me, the world shifted. The familiar light casting over the room flickered and darkened, as if reality itself was being smeared with thick, black oil. The child remained, a vessel of sorrow and darkness, and its hollow eyes bored into me, demanding to know my secret fears. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Stripped of bravado, I felt the frail edges of sanity peeling back, exposing the raw vulnerability beneath. "Just like them," the spectral child replied, its voice stronger now, the sound enveloping me like cold mist. You harbor the need to hide your own darkness. Why not join us? An unending chill crept through the air, sending life racing down my spine. The room morphed in tandem with the whispers echoing from the dark corners. Images of Sarah, Daniel, and memories I'd rather forget wormed their way to the surface, each replaying as though I were watching a film, one in which I was the unwilling star. Daniel's spirit, is it him? I asked, my mouth dry, aware that revealing too much risked opening the floodgates to a nightmare I struggled to contain. It's more than that, the child's voice echoed ominously. They wander aimlessly, searching for you. They want freedom from their pain, but pain binds them to you, just as it binds you. Despite my instinct screaming for me to flee, I was drawn into the web of the child's words. Sarah didn't kill him, did she? It wasn't her fault. The shadows shifted, as if recoiling from the truth that dared to surface. No one is innocent here, it said with a tilt of its head, as the rocking chair continued its disconcerting sway in the background. With each creak, I felt my pulse quickening, growing impatient, yearning for resolution amid the encroaching dread. You must decide, or they will drag you with them. Drag me? The shadows besieged me, creeping closer, with tendrils of darkness tracing my limbs. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes gathering, watching my every move, waiting to witness the dawning awareness that was perhaps the most horrific of all. Then, with a thunderous clap, the ground beneath my feet trembled again. For a moment, the room around me blurred, then a primal scream shattered the silence, clacking and crashing, as if the unseen forces were indulging in some grotesque dance of chaos. From deep in the corners of this abandoned living room, dark shapes twisted and writhed, morphing into twisted figures that seeped into my very core. Embrace the truth. The voices taunted, resonating from every shadow, the anguish projected, grief layering with each echoing plea. Sarah's decision wove their fates, and now your own loyalty is tested. Before I could fully grasp the implications of their words, they countered with flashes of memory, glimpses of Sarah standing over Daniel, a shadowed knife clutched in her grip. It was an image dragged from the recesses of my mind, painted with the colors of anguish and fear. Sarah killed him? I mouthed silently, the betrayal crashing like a tidal wave against my consciousness. Only she knows the truth, the child whispered, curling its bony fingers. And you must know, too, or live with this haunting ignorance forever. Suddenly, the air grew dense as blinding light flickered within the swirling shadows, filling my vision with a dizzying haze. The rocking chair screeched to a halt, and from behind it emerged what could only be described as fluid Raji, a wraith-like figure meandering forwards, its features blurred yet unmistakable. It was Sarah, her eyes glowing with a malevolence born not of her choosing. Why did you come here? She hissed, her voice raw, resonating with both a plea and a threat. You meddle with things beyond your understanding, Sarah. I cried, feeling a mixture of fear and an unfathomable longing for answers. Did you kill him? Is it your fault he's trapped? But the ghost before me dissolved into mist, becoming indistinguishable from the shadows around. I spun around through the chaotic whispers, the figures thrumming in unison, growing closer as if inviting me to reach into the heart of their dark tale. Confess. They clamored, shifting like storm clouds heavy with the promise of rain. Join us in truth or succumb to lie, please. You have to tell me. I stumbled forward, desperate. What shadows concealed in Sarah's truth? What bargain had she made that now closed in on me like a tax collector demanding an unimaginable debt? Just as the shadows leapt forth, a voice, deeper and heavier than the rest, pierced through the cacophony. Daniel's voice, laced with agony and rage. The one you love clings to bloodshed and secrecy. You must decide, will you face what she hides? In that moment, time twisted once more, squeezing me into a fate of decision with the haunting truth dangling precariously on the cusp. The silence that followed held an unbearable weight, and as a wave of spectral energy surged forth, the spectral child echoed a final curse. Beware, your knowledge could be your downfall. As the wails climaxed into a terrifying crescendo, images flooded my mind. Sarah's cryptic smile, the knife's reflective blade, the warmth of her touch now laced with the chill of betrayal, and just as that looping cycle reached its zenith, the ground cracked beneath us, engulfing shadows with a ferocity that left no room for escape. My heart sank as I realized the walls closing in were no mere walls, they were the very fabric of our entwined destinies, and I stood at the precipice, straddling the line between truth and despair. With a gut-wrenching lurch, the darkness beneath me yawed open, revealing a bottomless void, pulling everything I knew into the depths. Choose now. A chorus of voices thundered, their blend of sorrow vibrating deep within my bones as the endless abyss beckoned me forth, either into the home of lost souls or the reckoning that awaited me, staring down into the hopelessness that awaited me, breath caught in my throat. Would I fall into the unknown, or could I reach out for Sarah, the nexus of my torment, and perhaps understand the enormity of her choices? And in that fateful heartbeat, I realized the shadows were no longer just around me, they were within me, demanding an end to the charade, daring me to leap into the abyss of truth or perish in my ignorance as the specters of our yesterdays laughed maniacally around me. The void's pull grew stronger, hungry for my secrets, twisting the very essence of who I was. The cacophony of whispers turned to desperate shrieks, clawing at my thoughts. Each soul's lament seemed an insistent reminder, my indecision might cost me everything. The darkness pulsated, a living entity absorbing the light around it, suffocating hope as it expanded. In that desperate moment, something in me snapped. Sarah! I screamed, sending my voice into the abyss, as if it could tether her spirit to me. I need you to tell me the truth. Did you kill him? Was it you? No sooner had I called her name than tendrils of shadow erupted around me, coiling like snakes eager to strike. They lashed against my skin, icy and invasive, forcing me to confront the weight of the question. Each question unveiled more memories, sharp and cruel, slicing through the veil of denial I had shrouded myself in since that fateful night. Visions of Sarah's cries echoed in my mind, the despair clawing at her throat, the way the shadows wrapped around her as if offering a perverse comfort. It was this comforting kiss of darkness that veiled the truth from her. Her descent into grief clouded the intentions of her heart, and even now, a part of me whispered, is it the guilt that surrounded her that robs her of her light, my love, my pain? The wraith-like figure of Sarah murmured as she emerged, this time clearer but surrounded by a halo of darkness snaking around her soft, delicate frame. Her eyes bore not the malevolence from before but a wild fear, a reflection of dread that splintered my heart into shards. You shouldn't have come here, she stammered, her voice trembling on the precipice of rage. You think you understand, but you don't. You can't. What happened that night, Sarah? I pressed, resolute, feeling the ground beneath quaking still, a pulsating beat sinking with the heavy weight on my chest. I knew this was the only way, teaching the shadows to relinquish their grip on her soul. Was it you? Tell me. As I spoke, I caught movement from the corners of my eye, ethereal figures, each one twisted and ash-gray. They hovered like specters, their hollow eyes flickered with longing as they reached for Sarah, each voice converging into a frantic chaos, echoing the haunting refrain, "The truth shall consume you. You must answer, enough." She screamed, recoiling, but her uncontrollable fury only strengthened their resolve, feeding into their wails until the air itself vibrated with anguish, a maelstrom of torment that reverberated through the chamber. Shadows molded outward while the walls pulsed in rhythm with an unseen heartbeat, the room itself unraveling into spiraling doubt. No. I shouted, attempting to drown out their dreadful symphony. We can break this if you only acknowledge your past. The ground shook violently, upheaval swirling around us, and suddenly Sarah's image plain before me distorted, settling into anguish as vulnerability crested the surface like a wave. I was in so much pain, she gasped, inhaling with a sudden urgency. I couldn't let him go, I couldn't face the truth. With her confession hung heavy in the air, the shadows recoiled and swelled, as if feeding off her emotional confession, each pulse vibrant and alive, and terrifyingly pregnant with possibility. Their moments of clarity appeared to grant her power, but amidst the chaos, a gasping breath slithered through the dark, woven deeply into the threads of my consciousness, a voice that echoed Daniel's lament. Innocence drowned in blood, his resonant voice thundered, clashing against Sarah's cries for mercy. Is that how love remembers? The wail erupted, and the very fabric of existence trembled once more, the shadows shifting into a confident fury, weaving between truths and lies, binding me in their grip. You're running out of time, they chanted, hissing like serpents. Each moment brings you closer to the inevitable. My heart raced. Truth hadn't come to claim me, it was a lie and torment that demanded my surrender. I began to see the implications of it all, a web of betrayal tightly wound around at least three of us. Each perspective demanded acknowledgement, Sarah's, mine, Daniel's. As I prepared to confront the dreadful abyss that beckoned, an icy finger grazed my neck, drawing my gaze back to the shadows shifting around. They no longer whispered, they sang madly, a ballad of regret and rage that twisted the air into suffocating dread. The enormity of the crossroads split open before me. Choose, or be consumed. The chorus thundered, the very walls pulsating a warning. And then, with a guttural love-laden cry, Sarah surged forward, her spectral form wreathed in fury and despair. You can't leave me, not after what I've done. The shadows erupted with violent force, dragging me toward the now gaping void that seemed to pulsate with her agony. Earth and floor splintered, revealing a chasm framed by despair. Just as my body began to surrender, my mind teetering at the edge of oblivion, I glimpsed a figure streaking through the darkness, a flash of warmth in a sea of cold despair. It was Daniel, more solid now than any of the figures around. An anguished wail escaped his lips as he reached toward me. "Help me!" he cried, the plea bursting forth through layers of sorrow and torment. "Only you can unravel this," and with those final words, the shadows widened, licking at my feet, greedy for my choice, pulling me further down into the chasm of harrowing uncertainty. In that heart-stopping moment, I glimpsed the soaked knife that had birthed this madness, glimmering in the depths. Would I descend to the truth or bury the cries within the layers of shadow? In that breathless instant before the fall, the abyss beckoned, and I simply knew I was not the only soul trapped in this black spiral. It was a haunting of choices and consequences yet to come. The darkness yawned before me, a chasm lined with the memories of what had been, as the spectral figures seethed and twisted. I felt myself slipping, the cold tendrils of shadow wrapping around my limbs, pulling me toward a precipice of understanding that I dreaded to embrace. Below me, Daniel's anguished visage lingered, hauntingly vivid, though the depths of his own turmoil had crafted a far more terrifying fate than I ever could have conceived. "Only you can unravel this." The words reverberated through my skull, but the weight of the truth loomed larger than my resolve. The shadows, now crackling with frenetic energy, surged forward, and I was engulfed in a palpable cacophony of anguish. "Why wouldn't you tell me, Sarah?" I shouted over the bedlam, desperately clinging to sanity as the world swirled around me. "Why would you keep this all buried? It's suffocating you." With that, I turned to her, seeking the remnants of the love I once knew, but what gazed back was both familiar and utterly foreign, a sorrow deep enough to drown in, filled with shadows that twisted her features further, making her seem a parody of the tender spirit I loved, because, she gasped, her essence growing thin, the only way to hold on to him was to erase it all, erase the guilt. Her eyes, darkened pools of despair, reflected a fatalistic acceptance, as if she had sealed herself away, sacrificing her own light in the process. But as her confession hung uncomfortably in the air, churned by the whispers of the damned, I felt the floor shift, the very world around us trembling with primordial fear. I had the growing sense that even Daniel, wrapped in his own grief, was caught in this malevolencia, pawn in Sarah's desperate game. "I tried to protect us, to protect him," she cried, her voice now laced with a fevered desperation that scratched at the walls of my heart. In that moment, I saw the flicker of something else in her eyes, an unholy determination that seemed to beckon the shadows closer. "No," I said frantically, stumbling backward as the ground quaked beneath me. "By holding Daniel's spirit here, you've chained him to this horror. You've not saved anyone." The shadows paused, their voracious hunger wavering as they watched our interaction. They were sentient, aware, drawn to the fragments of our unraveling fates. Suddenly, bursts of anguished laughter erupted from the void as the ethereal figures snickered at the notion of love erasing truth. They seemed to feed off our turmoil, the sinister delight a stark contrast to the dread in my gut. "You think it's as simple as that?" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper, her demeanor shifting, palpable anger simmering just beneath the surface. You don't know the depths of love, the unimaginable lengths we go to protect the ones we cherish. An unbidden shudder ran through me. It was clear now, the haunting wasn't solely Daniel's, it was Sarah's, too. With every layer peeled back, the corners of her mind were revealed to be as murky as the abyss that surrounded USA fused existence bound by guilt and terror. I loved him enough to shield him from his weaknesses, she continued, her voice rippling with an eerie calmness. He could never accept our choices, not once the truth lay bare before him. Remember our last night together? He could have saved himself, but chose betrayal. The memory washed over me, a haunting echo of our laughter, palpable with flavor but laced with an undercurrent of dread. I had seen the best of them, in the daylight serenades and the midnight gatherings lost under the veil of intimacy, but now they resonated with a hollow creep, a distant memory drenched in shades of betrayal. But before I could respond, the shadows pulsed violently, as if sensing a rupture in the fragile emotional fabric of our exchange. The whispers crescendoed into an unbearable roar, and the dark entities hissed, frenzied, yearning for clarity, for the acknowledgement of sins unconfessed. No. Sarah bellowed, stretching her hands toward the void, but it was too late. In the fray, I glimpsed figures materializing behind her, Daniel among them, and his expression sent jolts of icy dread coursing through my veins. You bind him here, I shouted, panic-stricken. As her heartache grew palpable, the specters began to merge. Even in life, Daniel always had an uneasy relationship with the shadows. With every scrap of recognition, those dark forms began to intertwine together, a horrific amalgamation of all who had been wronged, joined in their gnarled pursuit of vengeance. Then, in a moment that could only be described as otherworldly, the walls of our reality began to close in, bleeding the inky darkness from every corner, an inkling of depth where fear thrived. The air grew damp as the rancor twisted like poison in the room. Your truth binds me, Daniel howled, his tormented gaze splitting the very fabric of my being. Sarah, release me. As if swept up in a cataclysmic storm, chaos reigned. With every flicker of vulnerability, shadows quaked, resonating with sarcophagal rage. I now understood Daniel needed to break free from the haunting shackles Sarah had cast around his spirit. But what if undoing her bond required a price too high, a sacrifice I was unwilling to pay? My heart thundered as I realized the encompassing truth. It was not just Sarah's choice to be questioned, mine was tethered directly to this madness, looming in the tendrils of horrible uncertainty, and for every shred of light I wished to bring forth, darkness surged forth in retaliation. There I stood, caught at the precipice of fate. As Daniel's anguished wails became a crescendo, a bone-chilling silence fell, and I found myself alone with Sarah in the ghostly glow, ashes of lost love swirling around us like a tempest. Then, a piercing scream tore through the air, wobbling my reality. It echoed the depths of despair, a savage war cry losing its last vestige of hope, reverberating through my soul. Only then did the shadows lurch forward, an immense, living wave of darkness, closing in around Sarah's fragile form. The veils were torn, and I was struck with a vision more terrifying than the absence of truth itself. The relentless consuming shadows were not just seeking to ensnare her, but to feast on our intertwined sins. In a heartbeat, I reached for her, my hand brushing against the cold grasp of the void that threatened to claim us both. No, Sarah. But the cacophony was too loud now, a wrathful tide swallowing her cries. The shadows engulfed her, twisting her form, dragging her deeper into the abyss, the energy surging, building, and suddenly, she was gone, lost amongst the howling figures of anguish. My mind reeled as the finality of her fate sank into the marrow of my bones. The specters turned toward me, a thousand eyes gleaming, waiting for my choice in the all-consuming dark, the only question left lingering, asking for the dreadful answer. Was this darkness bound to heartache, or was it a living entity, hungry to extract the secrets we both held? As the last remnants of my reality began to dissolve, I realized I might be the only one capable of unveiling the final horrors that lurked just beyond sight, a conundrum cloaked in shadows, suffused in secrets, desperately pleading to be set free. And finally, as I grasped for the last flicker of light, I understood, this battle had just begun. I awoke to an echoing silence, silencing the haunting chants of sorrow that had enveloped me. The darkness stretched around like an endless void, wrapping me in a cold embrace, tangling my senses and obscuring my fate. Confusion crashed like a wave, leaving my thoughts muddled while the remnants of lifeless dread fluttered around me like moths to a flame that I could feel the remnants of the encounter simmering in the depths of my being, but now what lurked in the shadows was no ordinary darkness. The realization sent a chill creeping through my veins. I no longer stood as a mere witness to the horror that had unfolded around me. I was trapped, ensnared in a labyrinth woven from the threads of guilt, love, and betrayal. As I tentatively ventured forward, I felt the shadows shifting beneath my feet, pulsing with dark energy eager to ensnare me once more. Each step was heavy with uncertainty, whispering secrets in a language I could almost comprehend. Lingering thoughts of Sarah swirled in the fog of my mind, tangled with memories of laughter and warmth now replaced with panic, confusion, and unrelenting sorrow. Sarah. I called, my voice echoing into the void, but met only with silence. I pressed onward, the weight of dread closing in, knowing I was rapidly losing what little footing I had left. Around me, the shadows shifted with anticipation, coaxing me forward, but I hesitated as a sound broke through the stillness, a soft, familiar voice laced with anguish. "Help me!" It was her. The pleading tones reached from beyond the darkness, yet tinged with a startling twist that sent tremors racing through my heart. "Where are you?" I shouted, the echo shocking even to me as I stumbled forward, desperate to pinpoint the source of her voice. The shadows seemed to swirl with discontent, rippling like water as I closed in. Then, in a glimmer of muted light, I caught a glimpse of her, a figure lost among the dark mists, eyes shimmering with a plea that felt both urgent and hopeless. "Sarah." I cried again, my voice trembling with uncertainty. The shadows recoiled momentarily, and her form grew closer, her features shadowed yet unmistakable. "Me, best friend, ensnared in a lattice of darkness, help me, you have to help me," she rasped, her eyes wide with fear and anguish, reflecting the turmoil that bound us all. Daniel, her, and me, a tangled web of entrapment and choice. "Release him, Sarah. You need to let him go." I stepped forward, propelled by a sense of duty towards the shadows pulling at my heart. But a flicker of dread darted across her face, her expression shifting, darkening like the shadows that clung to her. "And oh no. I can't," she implored, her voice teetering on the edge of madness, words twisting around in a desperate plea. "You don't understand." Her form pulsed rhythmically, ebbing like the tide, shadows coiling with each desperate syllable. For a brief moment, clarity pierced through the chaos. I saw Daniel's face, vivid and etched in a mixture of sorrow and regret, his essence attempting to reach Sarah, but the shadows constricted around him, preventing his plea from threading through the oppressive dark. "Together, we can break this cycle," I urged, desperation tying my voice to the gravity of our situation. "All of this pain, the guilt, they don't belong to you anymore." She leaned closer, eyes narrowing, clouds of shadow swirling around her form like a tempest of indecision. "But what if the truth is worse than the pain?" she whispered just above a breath. "What if my love for him shackles us all?" I paused, heart racing, as the truth seeped in. Was her fear of truth so profound it blinded her? "You have to trust me," I shouted, grasping for the last threads of hope. "Love is not built on secrets. Let him go. You can be free." The shadows writhed angrily, as if challenging the notion, twisting around her tighter and tighter until a chorus of anguished screams erupted from the depths of darkness. They were not just echoes of lost souls, they were reflections of our inner turmoil, of every shadow we harbored within. "Sarah, listen to me," I shouted, the depth of my conviction echoing through the emptiness. "You loved him enough to fight. Don't you see? The shadows feed on us, on the lies and the suffering we imprison ourselves with. You have the power to break free." In that split second, an immense silence fell. As my declaration resonated around us, something in her expression shifted. The swirling mists of shadows retreated slightly, revealing the glimmers of a spark deep inside Sarah's eyes, the flicker of a past I had once known. In her laughter, in her spirit, "Please," she whispered, and in that word, I saw not just the smattering of fear but the glimmering essence of resolve beginning to rise from the ashes of despair. With an impulsive movement, I stepped closer, stretching my hand toward her. Together. I beckoned, and as her gaze locked onto mine, the shadows screamed in protest, clawing at her soul desperately. "Daniel!" she shouted suddenly, her voice breaking through the turmoil. "I love you more than all of this. I release you." With those words, the shadows froze. There was a moment of unbearable tension, as if the fabric of reality held its breath. Daniel's form flickered, his essence brightening beneath the storm of darkness. I felt hope surge as Sarah's grip on shadows began to wane. In an instant, everything shifted. The darkness screeched, yanking at my limbs in a frenzy, attempting to reclaim its hold, but Sarah stood her ground, her face an ethereal picture of fierce determination. "I set you free!" she screamed, a callous roar that tore through the darkness surrounding us, and then, miraculously, the shadows shrank back, chaos consuming itself reluctantly. A brilliant light broke through the suffocating dark, illuminating the tortured abode we had been trapped in. As I felt warmth wash over me, I turned back, seeing Daniel escape from the depths, his face transforming from sorrow to acceptance. "Sarah!" he cried, arms stretched toward her, "you did it." Shadows receded as if they betrayed their own, the house groaning like a wounded beast while drifting away from its heavy past, and in that moment, something shifted deep within me. A realization cut through with jagged clarity. The horror we had faced wasn't just an endless cycle of suffering, it was the truth unveiled that had the potential to shatter every binding tether. As Daniel and Sarah surged toward one another, everything came crashing back into focus. Freedom swirled, taking flight as the echoes of anguish were drowned out by their reunion. "Let it be over," I whispered, tears cascading quietly down my cheeks, but just as the light began to engulf us, as I felt the shadows recede entirely, a shimmer caught my eye just at the edge of my visione, a flicker in the dark. And in that moment, a terrible understanding fell upon me. The shadows hadn't scattered, they lingered, regrouping, feeding hungrily on the very essence of the moment, threatening to morph into something more insidious. Before I could process the chilling realization, a voice emerged from the depths, clear and reverberant, a murmur swirling within a somber chorus: "The darkness is merely waiting for your choice." It echoed with the weight of despair and triumph alike, and in that breathless instant, I turned back to Daniel and Sarah, knowing what we had fought against was a mere premonition of the horrors that had yet to unfold. As the brightness enveloped us, the last thread of reality unspooled, and I grasped something deeper than dread creeping in the edges of my being. It was an abyss gnawing at the very core of my soul, a reminder that even in liberation, darkness still loomed, hungry and patient, and, like a relentless specter, it echoed softly, "You cannot escape. Forever entangled. Forever haunted. Forever waiting."